Yeah. To the H barn thing, the H barn hoedown.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, is your mic on? Okay.
Okay, I'll do that again. For the second time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the October 2nd meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Lakewood. I have a few things on our docket this evening, so we'll get right to it. Ms. Deborah, would you please call roll?
Philip Combs,
Present.
Lynn Larson,
Present.
Mark Hare, Philip Lindholm,
Present.
Ellen Talbo,
Present.
and Sharon Wallace.
Is the phone number ending 5065 Sharon Wallace?
Yes, it is.
If it's her, then she's on the virtual attendee today.
Can you hear me?
You have quorum.
Thank you. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes of September 18th, 2024. You all had a chance to look at that. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Hirsch, second by Mr. Larson. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Any agenda updates?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Public comment period. We will now open for public comments. I see we do have one individual that has signed up. I want you all to remember that this is not a discuss and session. We do not engage in conversation, but we do take your comments seriously and under advisement. Commissioners ask that your comments be courteous and respectful, be related to planning commission matters, and be limited to 3 minutes. I also want to add that if you're you want to make a comment regarding the public hearing portion of the meeting, that you should probably wait because your comments under public comments will not be documented. We have Mr. Foley, who is asked to speak under public comments. Mr. Foley? Sir, please.
I've never done this before. I've never been to a meeting before.
Well, welcome, sir.
I even had problems hearing you because my hearing's not so good. So I just heard my name and that was good enough, okay?
Right, sir.
I live on Lake Steilacoom. And I know that Edgewater development or something is going to happen to it. I have a lot of things about it that I thought, but I'm told I only have like 3 minutes or something.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's not going to work. But I have some, am I allowed to just submit this later on?
You can, sir.
Okay, that helps out. So the only one I would really like to work with now is, I looked at your little schematic and it showed all the development and that was just fine. But there are 40 little submerged trunks in the water in and around that area. My concern is, what are you going to do with that? And one of the things is, you could actually hire somebody and you pull all the stumps out, and that would cost you tens and twenties of thousands of dollars. Not only that, but the rest of the lake's got the problem with it as well. Second thing is you could do nothing about it, and then you get all kinds of legal issues and stuff about boaters and stuff hitting their outboard motors and stuff on the submerged stumps. The third thing about it is, a couple of 3 years ago, I asked somebody, I go, is there such a thing as a underwater chainsaw? And the guy goes, oh yeah, there's one. But it's like $5,000 to even buy one. And then you have to have the hydraulic something, to go with it. So it could be as much as 10,000. But then I looked at what you guys were doing, and it says like, you've appropriated something like $1 million for Edgewater to be expanded or something. So that's a drop in the bucket, 10,000. What I really would not like to have is, I don't want to have all these orange cones sitting on top of each one of these submerged things to make it look like a General Motors test track. I would really like to have something that looks kind of natural, since that's, what the fish and wildlife people are trying to emphasize anyway. So if it's possible, no one's ever given me an answer on it, but I would like you to consider finding some way of getting rid of those stumps, because that's probably the end point, without having to put on the orange cones or some type of a caution or something else. And if it costs like $10,000 to buy one of those things, can you imagine being able to cut everyone for the rest of the lake as well? And then you'd never have a problem again. That 3 minutes?
Yes.
Close enough for government
Close
work. Okay, can I submit something like this?
Yes, sir.
There you go,
Right
man.
there.
You can have the rest of the day off.
Thank you, sir. Under public comments, we have no one else that has signed up virtually. Do we have Mrs. Spear?
We have Josh Friedman with his hand up, but I'm not sure if Mr. Friedman wishes to speak under public comment or during the public hearing for the 2025 comp plan amendments. So, Mr. Friedman, can you clarify?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can see him trying to talk, but there's no.
Yeah. One
Can you hear me?
second, excuse me. Can you keep talking, Josh, just to test?
Just talking here to test the microphone. Let me know when you can hear me.
There we go. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Friedman.
Good evening. I am dialing in, and it's actually Rosh Hashanah evening, and I've stepped away from dinner with my family. So unless the Planning Commission objects, would it be possible for me to make a public comment now?
If you don't do it under public hearing, it won't be considered part of the public record for the topic.
Understood. Then I will just make it now as just standard public legislative advocacy, if that's okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Josh Friedman, and I'm following up on previous comments that I've made on behalf of LRI, LeMay, and Waste Connections. As the local operators for Waste Connections, LRI and LeMay provide garbage, recycling, and composting services to the city of Lakewood, as well as its homes and businesses. As the council and commission have been working hard to prepare for and accommodate housing and job growth in Lakewood, LRI and Waste Connections are also committed to making sure that garbage, recycling, and compost services in the community can keep pace with that housing and job growth. We greatly appreciate the good partnership we've been building with the city's professional staff for that purpose. To continue the process that this partnership has made in working to ensure that the waste needs of new housing and employment can be fully and efficiently accommodated, we ask and recommend that you approve the draft 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendment docket that the city's professional staff have prepared for you this evening. In addition to the other critical planning matters that this recommended docket will include, it also authorizes the staff to evaluate and study the possibility of reinstating the industrial land use and zoning designation on the easterly part of LRI's Sales Road site. I regret that I'm not able to join you at the meeting in person tonight, but I believe LRI's district manager, Kevin Green, has made it in person and can answer any questions you may have about the suggested docket item related to this site. Thank you again for your consideration and your important work for the city of Lakewood.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Spear, do we have anyone else?
I don't see anyone else who's ready to speak under public comment.
Okay, in that case, we will close the public comment portion of this meeting. Next on the agenda is our public hearing. And our first is the special joint public hearing. Washington Department of Ecology, City of Lakewood. The hearing on the 2024 locally initiated updates to the Lakewood Shoreline Master Program. Ms. Spear, or do you have some words for us, please?
Yes, I will be introducing this topic this evening. This is a joint public hearing, as you just mentioned. The City of Lakewood and the Department of Ecology are holding a joint public hearing this evening on what are called locally initiated updates to our Shoreline Master Program, the SMP for short. Our SMP was last adopted under state law schedule in 2019. It is not scheduled for a full review until 2029. However, because of the recent adoption of changes to our critical areas ordinance as part of the 24 comprehensive plan update, we did go ahead and move forward with faster than usual review, specifically to reflect those changes to our critical areas ordinance. So the SMP and the CAO, or critical areas ordinance, are consistent. So the next one, as I just mentioned, for the full review of the SMP will be in 2029. And just another note that with the big 24 package that was just adopted a few weeks ago by council, the Shoreline Master Program, which has been a standalone document, has now been incorporated into the Lakewood Municipal Code at Chapter 1610. That'll be in effect on January 1st of 2025. So there is authorization under the state WAC, 173-26-104, to do this optional joint review process. There is this set of criteria coming again out of the WACs regarding the proposed amendments, and I won't read them verbatim, but essentially there's no uncoordinated development of the state's shorelines. Everything is consistent with the Shoreline Management Act. It meets all procedural rule requirements for public notice and consultation, and it does satisfy master program guidelines, et cetera, that you see there on the screen. If anyone would like to provide public comment, tonight is not the only opportunity. There's actually a 30-day comment period open right now. It started on September 18th and it runs through October 17th. And those can be sent to, oh, for heaven's sakes, don't send it to my personal email, please. It should be tspirit@cityoflakewood.us. I'm so sorry. Or physically at 6000 Main Street Southwest. We will not be responding to comments or questions raised during the hearing this evening, but we will follow up with responses to any public comments that might be submitted. So as far as what the actual amendments are, they're pretty, I don't want to say simplistic, but they're pretty simple and clear cut. First is to just update references to ordinances. So in this case, it's talking about the new Chapter 14, which is our critical areas ordinance that goes into effect again per Ordinance 813 that was just adopted by the City Council a few weeks ago. Secondly, there's some changes happening to numbering on the code of Title 14. And so this is just reflecting that updated code number. And then where you see the underlines, that is a change that's just explained in a little more detail with the double asterisks at the bottom. There's some information that was already included in the critical areas ordinance, but the Department of Ecology recommended that it also be included within the Shoreline Master Program itself regarding utility line trenching, and that it would not be allowed in Category 1 or 2 wetlands and would be discouraged in Category 3 and 4 wetlands. Again, a change in numbering of code sections because of the changes that have been adopted in the critical areas ordinance, and then having that consistent reference in the SMP. Probably the biggest substantive change that's being talked about is taking language regarding wetland buffers out of the Shoreline Master Program and dropping it into the critical areas ordinance. So the fact that this language is being deleted does not mean the city is no longer regulating these topics. It's that the code has moved out of what is now Title 16, the Shoreline Master Program, and has been dropped into and updated in Title 14, the critical areas ordinance. In terms of schedule, we have tonight the joint public hearing, but the public comment period, as I said, is open through October 17th. And then this will be moving forward after your action in 4 weeks on November 6th. It'll go to the City Council. This is the only public hearing. This is a slightly different process than happens with most of the topics the council or the commission looks at. This will not have a public hearing at the City Council level. This is the only one, but then people have until October 17th to submit public comment directly to staff at the city. And with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions or turn it over to public hearing.
Does the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Spears? Okay, at this time, then we will open up the public hearing portion for the topic of the 2024 Lakewood Shoreline Master Program. Again, as indicated earlier, we asked you to be courteous and to limit your talk to 3 minutes. And first on the agenda is Mr. Foley.
If you guys buy that underwater, whatever it is I told you about, then it's yours forever. And as I said, one by one, get a couple of teenagers and stuff, they'd love to be able to snorkel underneath and just cut all of the submerged stuff. You know, between that island and the peninsula where you can't even get your canoe through there, wouldn't that be nice to open all of that up? Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Foley, and we will use your written comments also. Next listed is Ms. Suzanne. Don't need to be? Ms. Spear, do we have anyone on virtual?
I don't see anyone with their hand raised in the virtual world to testify on this, Mr. Chair.
Okay, in that case, we'll close the public hearing portion. Next, Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the next public hearing, if you're ready to do so.
Next public hearing is the second public hearing on the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Cycle Docket List.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is in part because of an error in our own internal process for advertising the comprehensive plan docket hearing that happened at the last meeting. So we are wanting to just take a belts and some suspenders approach and do a second hearing tonight. But this is regarding setting the docket list for 2025's comprehensive plan amendment cycle. So this is not tonight a substantive decision on any of these topics. This is simply the Planning Commission preparing a recommendation on to the City Council about which items should be considered and talked about substantively starting next spring for potential changes to comp plan policies, zoning, and/or development regulations. This is a docket that is slightly accelerated from the normal schedule that you would have seen. There are several items in the docket list that need to be completed per state law by June 30th of next year. And so the way we're working this through the calendar at the Commission and Council starting early 2025, we'll be able to meet that deadline. Again, this is the second public hearing on these items. And then tonight you are scheduled to take action on this item once you're through your public hearing process. So as you recall, maybe from the last meeting, we do have a list that is separated. One is the list of things that the city is recommending primarily because they're required by state law. But then there's several that are tentative, meaning it would be up to you to decide to include or recommend against because of what the topic is, whether it is something you feel should be moved forward to City Council for consideration. The initial 7 that are all recommended because of state requirements, 1 through 7 in the list of the docket. One relates to co-living housing requirements. Co-living housing is essentially single room occupancy, if you remember that term from years past. The second is updating the capital facilities, parks, and utilities elements of the comprehensive plan to comply with new climate change requirements at the state level. The third is to make sure our middle housing, or if you remember from the 24 package, anything from a duplex up to a sixplex, courtyard apartments, townhomes, all fall in that term, are the regulations that we would now have in place, make sure that those are consistent with what is allowed or not allowed for a city to regulate on that housing type. The fourth is consistency again with Senate Bill 5792. 2025-05 relates to residential parking requirements. There's some additional refinements to that were adopted by the legislature this year. The sixth is some technical, non-substantive things, cleaning up the civic use section of our code. And then the seventh is the adoption of a new commute trip reduction plan that would last from 2025 through 2029. So those are all recommended by the city because of state requirements. Then we get into some of what I called the tentative ones in this presentation tonight. First is it's a step before a step, if you will. This is putting an opportunity in front of the city council to decide whether they want to put in place a real estate sales and use tax deferral program for converting commercial buildings into affordable housing. In order for anything to happen in a comp plan cycle, the city council would need to take action first to put the sales and use tax deferral program in place. So this is just putting the topic in front of them for that consideration. If they decide they don't want to do it, you'd never see this again. They would have made that determination and then the amendments wouldn't be needed. The next one is one of the ones that Commissioner Lynn Larson provided earlier this year in the 2024 package, and then was put into this instead in terms of legislative process. This is looking at potentially expanding the station district sub-area boundaries. There is a current sub-area policy in the comp plan that says develop and implement redevelopment and sub-area plans for other areas in the city, such as Springbrook, the downtown, the Pacific Highway Southwest Corridor, and selected residential arterials. The recommendation that's come, or the request that's come from Commissioner Larson, is talking about bringing this into the sub-area, bringing Springbrook into the Station District sub-area. So adding that section of the city on the south side of I-5. The 10th tentative amendment is also one that came from the discussion that you have had with Commissioner Larson's recommendation earlier this year. This is to create a new sub-area plan for, quote, the district or area north of Steilacoom Boulevard and west of South Tacoma Way. This is somewhat related to an urban design strategy that, again, is included in the city's comprehensive plan, talking about developing an individual identity for the international district. This one I should have said as well as the one regarding Station District, assuming you would want to send this forward, that's your decision this evening, and then assuming that the council would include this in the docket list, there is also a funding discussion that would need to happen, because right now, neither one of these are funded. It's up to the city council to approve that process. The last one, this is also a tentative one for you to decide whether you want to incorporate, is the request that you heard Mr. Friedman mention under public comment, and testimony was provided in writing as well to all of you today, as well as at the last meeting. But LRI/Waste Connections is looking to rezone. It's in this purple circle here. It's in this purple or blue circle here, that particularly tiny little square blown up. It's this parcel, which is within, as you can see, partly the air corridor zone 1 of the city. It's within partially accident potential zone 1 for the McCord Field. And in past times, it was a split zoned parcel, meaning it was partially within air corridor 1, but in order to avoid split zoning on a parcel, which the city doesn't encourage, a few years ago, this was rezoned to be completely within the air corridor zone, which limits the types of uses that can be on it. So unless you would like me to go into more detail, essentially what we're have in front of you tonight is whether you want to keep this conversation going to look at whether this parcel should be rezoned, either to be split zoned again, or as LRI has requested, to be completely rezoned industrial, which is what you see down here. If you can see my cursor, kind of that pinkish purplish color to the east and south of that particular parcel.
So the first group of amendments
Yes.
are the ones that it's going to be a separate resolution for those.
These are all in the same resolution in
Same
your packet.
resolution.
Yep. And actually, I should have explained that first. Thank you. The resolution has all 11. And so if there are any that you would like to take back out, that would need to be an amendment that you would do tonight orally. Otherwise, if you say, send this resolution forward as is, all of these are included in it for council consideration.
So the last three that you spoke about, those are just our recommendations, one way or the other, to move forward, not to be included.
The recommendation is to the city council to say, include this in the docket.
Okay,
What that means is then the city would start to do its analysis of those amendments and then come back with a recommendation to you and to city council next spring, whether that makes sense under the GMA all the way through city code, et cetera. It would
Mr.
just keep
Larson.
the discussion going.
Mr. Larson.
How is this modified by the last paragraph on the page we're presented here, saying that they don't want to rezone anything except the most easterly part of their property that is not within the air corridor?
Are you referring to written comments that are in front of you from LRI?
Yes. This page you.
Yeah, this was received late today, so I haven't had a chance to review it.
Okay.
However, if what they're asking for is to reinstate the split zoning, that's up to you to recommend next spring, yes or no on. And at this point, it's really just, again, to keep it in the docket so the review can happen next step.
To his point, it's not our recommendation whether it should be approved or not, but just whether it should remain in the docket and go forward
Correct.
for the
Correct.
city council to make their recommendation. Got it? Okay.
So once you're through with your public hearing, or all of the public hearings tonight, and you come back to business, these are the ways to address this issue tonight, this whole packet. A, the motion is there on the screen, and I'll bring it back up, just saying recommending all 11, or you can amend it by changing or removing any of the ones that are in there right now, which again is all 11. Or if you actually had something you wanted to add this evening, you are able to do that as well. And with that, I'll get out of the way for public hearing, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Larson, again.
Thank you. I would still like clarification that the last paragraph says that now they want to say that their proposal does not rezone and redesignate the entire parcel as industrial. No change to the staff's draft resolution if it is required, but just wanted to note this clarification for record. We're not asking the city to apply industrial zoning or designation within the protected avian air clear zone, but only the easterly areas of the parcel which fall outside of the air corridor zone. And so it would seem to me that they want to use a property that's that is industrial, but not within the air corridor as industrial. And is that clear? Is that correct? My view of that?
Just a high level overview. Before, I believe the year was 2019, when the rezone occurred of the parcel, it was a split zone parcel. And there was a portion on the western side that was within the air corridor zone. The other side to the east was industrial one, like the parcels around it to the east. What they're asking is that be reinstated. So again, right now, you're not recommending one way or the other. You're just saying, city council, please consider this as part of the docket next year. But it sounds like with this comment tonight, they're saying we're fine with going back to a split zone parcel. So again, that analysis will happen next spring, assuming this goes forward.
Okay. For the record, I don't see any problem with having split zone outside the air corridor. If it were to have an adverse effect on the air corridor, then I've got my my hackles up, because that's there for a big reason, that is to protect the aircraft.
And the public. Mr. Combs.
I was just gonna offer a suggestion, since we have so many recommendations on here, Chair, if you thought it'd be okay to just see if everyone was in agreement on all of them, or because we could go through them one by one, but maybe if there's dissent on any of them, then we go through one by one. But if we're in agreement that it's worth exploring further and keeping on the docket, we can just move forward.
We need to have the public hearing
Finish.
first.
We need to
What's that?
finish the public.
We need to have the
hearing.
public hearing first.
Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
have that part, but keep that thought, so, and that's why I asked about the two resolutions.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Ms. Spear before we open up the public hearing? Okay, so now we will open up public hearing on the comprehensive plan cycle docket list. No one has signed up in person. Do we have anyone virtually?
No, Mr. Chair.
It's closed. Now we go to public hearing number 3. Public hearing on amendments to the Lakewood Municipal Code, 18A, to readopt language erroneously removed in 2019, regulating manufactured home parks, camping, and recreational vehicle parks. Ms. Spear, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So most of you were not here at the time, but in 2019, the city did I won't say complete, but a major rewrite and reorganization of its development code in Title 18A. It was a significant effort to move things around, reorganize the code, try to make sure everything was consistent internally. And in that process, we have now found this summer, actually, that there were some things erroneously removed altogether. And so this is trying to clean that error up. However, as we move forward, there may need to be some additional review to see if there's state law changes that have happened since 2019 we need to be consistent with. But as it stands before you tonight, the idea here is we are adding language back in that was already in the code for a number of years, and it needs to come back in, and I'll explain in a little more detail. So 2024-08 is the name of or number of the resolution that was offered to you tonight for action. Again, it was erroneously removed language regarding two things. One is development standards, and then the operation and maintenance of manufactured home parks. And then there was also language unintentionally removed regarding camping and recreational vehicle parks. As of now, just so you're aware, there are no camping and recreational vehicle parks in the city. There's a potential to have one, so we need the code in place should anyone ever come up and request that to be an allowed use. So again, no substantive changes are being proposed. This is just language that we need to put back in. This map here is an attempt to show you a couple of things. All of the colored rectangles or other shapes here are where we have existing manufactured home parks. Some are completely full, meaning there are no empty spaces. Others are not full. And so you have two columns on the right of numbers next to each of the names of those parks. So on the first column is the number of unit spaces that there are in a park. And then the second is, as of today, the number of occupied spaces with either a manufactured home, or in some cases, there are actually apartments or single-family homes that are, for whatever reason, included in the park as of now. Historically, who knows how they got there, but they're there. So if you were to look, for instance, at column 1 for Alpine Estates, there are 46 available spaces. There's 46 units in that, so it's a fully occupied park. If you jump down to Canterbury Estates, it's a 96 unit park, but there's only 94 occupied, meaning right now there's 2 empty spaces. What you see here as well is that on the left, you have a map. On the eastern side, though, is where most of these parks are located, as you can see. And all of this, we were just talking about the air corridor zone. Here is the clear zone, and right below that is the actual McChord Air Force Base airfield. So most of the city's manufactured home parks are actually within Air Corridor 1 or 2, meaning they are non-conforming uses. So just to let you know, the code already takes care of non-conforming uses and addresses that in a separate section that's not needing any changes tonight. We're just needing to get the language back in about O&M for these existing parks in particular. The other area of the city that has a number of parks, this down here, inset is Tillicum, and then Woodbrook. You see a number of parks down there, although some of those are emptying out. For instance, the very last one there on the list, Woodbrook Manufactured Home Park, there's 41 spaces, but only 27 units are in there right now. As you know, this part of the city is redeveloping right now. A lot of it's been rezoned as industrial, so that may continue to change down there. As it sits, though, there are 1,178 spaces that are available in all of these various manufactured home parks. So needing to make sure that those parks are run safely, health and safety of the residents and the general public are protected through these regulations. Oops, excuse me. So I'm not going to spend, again, a lot of time walking through this verbatim, but just to give you a flavor of what we're talking about, development standards that would apply to all of the parks. So talking about if it were a new park, there are no new parks that have come in since 2019 when the code was erroneously removed, which is partly why we are just discovering this now as no one's asked about it. But this is talking about the park design, consistency with other development regulations in other parts of the city for different types of housing, making sure sanitary sewer, stormwater, streets and open space and recreation are all provided for. And then using a recreational vehicle as a primary residence, that is allowed subject to state law with a couple of provisos, making sure that there's toilet and or shower requirement within the vehicle itself or within the park. And then also that a building and installation permit would be required. And then the building official may also have some review to conduct if it's being used as a primary residence. In terms of O&M of manufactured parks themselves, making sure it's safe, no combustible materials, for instance, being stored around any of the homes. You've got to make sure that streets, sidewalks, and public ways are maintained. Looking at the CCNRs and the resident manager's responsibility to make sure there are no violations. Jumping over to camping and recreational vehicle parks. Again, this is something that there are none in the city now, but we want to be proactive and have this in place should any be ever proposed. So talking about how long a vehicle could occupy one of these types of parks. Looking at, again, the design of the park itself, the size of the spaces, things like that, tent camping spaces as well, the setbacks that would be required between property lines as well as with public streets, as well as between each unit space. And then recreational areas within one of those camping and recreational parks. Landscaping requirements as well. And then utility and facility requirements. So for instance, having to have complete utility hookups for each RV space, having potable water available, restroom, shower, utensil cleaning facilities, etc. Lighting being safe among all the common walkways and restroom areas, recreation and well, and then access and circulation. So making sure roadways are safe as well. And again, additional information for access and circulation. Parking requirements, allowing the people that are there to occupy the park, as well as having the manager and employees with space, and then areas for boats, boat trailers, and other types of vehicles as well. So for both of these sets of regulations, what we're doing is having this hearing tonight and taking action. And then this will move forward to City Council starting October 28th. With that, happy to answer questions or turn it over for the public hearing.
Commissioners, questions? No?
If I may.
Okay, sir?
Ms. Spear, can you go back to the slide right before operations and maintenance of RV?
Sure. If I can get there. Tell me if I've gone too far.
Yeah, so one prior to the operation and maintenance.
So this one?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
I'm wondering why there needs to be a building and installation permit for an RV.
This is when they're being lived in as a primary residence. So it's like you're permanently parking your motorhome, and that is what you're going to live in.
Sure. Why does there need to be a building permit for that?
I don't know if you want to answer any of this. It's again related to primarily connection with utilities, but go ahead. I'm going to have Angie Silva, Deputy Director, answer that as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Planning Commission members. I'm Angie Silva, Assistant Director of Planning and Public Works. Let me read the language real quick, sir,
Yeah,
so I can understand the intent here. Typically, when it comes to building permits, especially as Ms. Spear mentioned, connection to a septic system, so it's not uncommon. RVs can be not only have their internal gray and black water tanks, but oftentimes to dispose of that wastewater or gray water, it's connected to a septic system for that disposal. Sometimes that connection to a septic system requires a plumbing permit related to that. In addition to, there are building setbacks that need to be mindful to ensure life safety of structures adjacent for fire protection. That is often reviewed in the building permit. Installation, as it relates to that, I don't necessarily know what the intent of installation is, but usually it has to relate on the building permit side. Again, that life safety, connection to water as well as wastewater services to ensure that that RV is habitable beyond a temporary period.
That's helpful. I guess I'm thinking about, for example, Lost Lake. If you're familiar with that community, it's in Lacey. That's a community where you have permanent septic or sewer installed on site on a particular lot. Same thing for water, same thing for power. If someone were to pull up their RV, I can see why we might need a permit for the installation of the septic and the sewer and the water and the power. If someone's just pulling up their RV and hooking up to it, I'm just confused why we're requiring a building permit for that.
Typically, that wouldn't trigger a permit because that existing kind of facilities are already been developed and permitted through a separate process. But to rent that space, for example, for a temporary or a long-term use, that wouldn't typically require a building permit unless, correct me, Ms. Spear, there is not an operational permit proposal in the draft code, correct?
And again, this is like you take the wheels off once you park it and that's it. You're not there for a vacation. You're not there for a short amount of time. You're there permanently.
No, I understand, but certainly people can live in an RV for a very long time and not take the wheels off. They might shock them, they might do other things. So, and this is in the context of a manufactured home park. So perhaps this could be taken offline. I'm just trying to figure out if someone's going to hook up to an existing structure. It surprises me we need a building permit for that.
What we can certainly do is bring that information back to you, assuming this goes forward and then comes back in the spring. Provide that
that'd be helpful.
information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just as a point of clarification, so I have an RV, so if I stop off at a local site to dispose of my waste, I stick a hose. And that's all I do. And then I pull it back out, wash it down. Okay. But if I want to stay there for an extended period of time, I don't want just that hose sticking there because it's going to stink like mad, you know, and it's just a hazard. So from that perspective, I would see where we would need some sort of more permanency because they're going to live there, not just stay overnight and just for a week. They're going to live there.
I
So
understand
that
whether you're
becomes-
there for a week or a month or a year. I don't know that it changes the nature of the hookup.
Oh, I think it does because you need something more permanent, not just a hole sticking in the ground. That's from, again,
I have an RV. I don't change the hookup based on how long I'm going to be there.
Ah,
It hooks up
okay.
the same.
okay,
It may be that state law requires it. I'll verify with our building official.
please.
Thank
Provide-
you.
yeah.
That's helpful.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, so we'll now open the public hearing. And I have no one that signed up here. How about virtually, Ms.?
There is no one online for this public hearing, Mr. Chair.
Either? Closed. Thank you. Moving on, we now have unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. No, we do not.
We do not. So we move on to new business. Our action on 3 items here. Commissioners, you have the items listed in front of you. I don't need to take them as listed. We know that the docket list will probably take more of our discussion. We have the one regarding the manufactured home parks, and we have the action on the consolidating the local permit review process. So why don't we start with the first one then, the 5290 consolidating local permit review processes. Ms. Silva?
Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners, this evening is a recommendation for action by this body to issue recommendations to City Council as it relates to code amendments pertaining to Senate Bill 5290 and consolidating local project review for land use and environmental permits. Over the course of September of this year, this body held a study session as well as a public hearing on proposed amendments to chapters 18A10, 18A20, and 18A30 as it relates to requirements for local project review, associated timelines, as well as noticing procedures when it comes to notice of complete or complete applications, notice of applications, as well as notice of decisions. With that, sir, I don't have a formal presentation for this evening, but I'm happy to answer any questions this body may have before potentially issuing a motion for recommendation.
Can you bring up the resolution, please, Ms. Mayor?
Working on it right now, sir.
Okay.
Give me just a second.
Commissioners, will please take a look at the resolution.
This is,
2024.
For your awareness, within tonight's packet at page 57. So if someone were wanting to make a motion to recommend approval, you could simply quote the title in bold there to do so.
You pull up next page, please.
So moved.
I will second. I did not refresh myself with this subject matter before tonight's meeting, but I did thoroughly go through it the previous meeting when Ms. Silva presented on the matter. And my takeaway was that much of the content and red lines that I saw was pretty administrative in nature. And so I didn't think that the changes were controversial or substantive enough to trigger any concern on my part. So I'll second the motion.
Been moved by Mr. Larson and seconded by Ms. Talbot to approve resolution 2024-06. Any further comments or questions regarding that? In case, all those in favor with an aye, please. Aye. Opposed? Passed.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, let's move on to the manufactured home parks and camping.
Okay, one moment. Sorry, don't get dizzy. There we go.
Again, if the commissioners will just take a look at that briefly, please.
And this is at page 45 of your packet.
Aspira, I would like to ask one question, and that was on the camping RV proposed regulations. Is there anything in the language that allows for the city to check, or I guess who is responsible for regulating whether a vehicle is there for more than 30 days? Is that on the camping, the owner's part?
Yeah, initially, and then if there's ever been a code enforcement complaint, if someone were to come, whether they're the operator of the park or anybody else, that car's been there way too long, code enforcement for the city would go out and verify that.
Okay. Are there, I'm not I'm not a camper, admittedly, well, I tend camping, but, so I'm not familiar with, RV parks as much, but are there is it typical for any jurisdiction or any entity to issue like a recreational pass for that type of activity?
I don't know because Lakewood doesn't have one, so I can't give you a good answer. Maybe somebody else here could.
question was from Ms. Talbot and asked by Ms. Spear, for the record.
Mr. Chair, I do have one
Mr.
question.
Her,
Ms. Talbot, I understand that this particular discussion here centers around RV and camping parks, which would seem to steer the conversation away from normal city-owned property like streets or just anywhere, really. So not camping, tent camping and or RVs that are being utilized in this manner outside of a designated RV park or camping area. There's a lot of discussion in here about standards and things like that, but if we get outside of a designated park, all that washes away.
This is not intended, it does not address the idea of an individual or a group using private or public property as a camping site, like a homeless camping site. This is specifically recreational. It is a set, zoned, identified parcel to be used as such within the city. And as I've said, there aren't any of these in the city at all. So this resolution would not address any question regarding homeless tents, anything else that might be set up. That's been addressed most recently by the city council in a separate ordinance that they adopted a few months ago. So this should not be interpreted as handling any of those same issues.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
It appears as though they have created a set of regulations for operation of regular business like RV and camping parks.
Yep.
And that's an asset to the city. And that by having the rules and regulations, it keeps the homeless creation from occupying these properties because of the rules and regulations. I think that's laudable, and I'd like to see it.
Any other questions, comments?
I could move to approve it, but I think we're waiting on some information back on the questions that Commissioner Lindholm already brought up, so.
You could hold it or you could move it forward and understand that that information will come back to you next spring as part of the information, assuming council wants to take this and add it to the docket.
So if we don't take action this evening, we'll wait till you say next spring?
If you don't take action this evening on moving this forward as part of the docket, I would probably bring it back to you in a month, but that would be past the time where the city council has started to talk about it. If you want to say, bring it back next year as a 2026 item, we would just set it aside for the next call for applications. So two different things. Right now, it's, do you want to say, yes, city council, keep talking about this topic? If the answer is yes, and they say yes, then next spring, when you would start reviewing this substantively, I would provide to you information in part to answer what Commissioner Lindholm was asking.
So the bottom line is, do we want it to go forward to be talked about, basically?
Yeah.
Not us to make them. It's Lindholm.
Yeah, if I may, I wouldn't want my questions or concerns to prevent further discussion. So.
Yeah, with that in
Mr.
mind,
Combs.
I would move, thank you, Chair. I'd move on this commission resolution number 2024-08.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Combs, second by Mr. Larson, that we adopt a resolution 2024-09 that is recommended be sent forward to the city council. Any other questions, comments regarding? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Lastly, we have our action on the cycle docket list recommendations. Mr. Combs, you had a recommendation on how we should approach this. Would you go through that again, please?
I guess my suggestion would be to see if everyone's in agreement with everything as it is. And at this point, all we're doing is giving the recommendation to explore it, not dive into it right here, right now. So for that reason, I would say if we, unless we have some objection to it, and then if we do, then we could go through one by one or pick out the one that's an issue and then proceed with the rest of that just to be expedient.
I thought going forward, it was just on the last group, not the whole
Yeah.
packet.
Resolution 2024-07, as it sits in your packet tonight and as the hearing was just held, includes all 11 items. The city is recommending to you 1 through whatever it is, 8, because those are all required by state law. There's not any give really on the city's part. The remainder, 3 or 4, excuse me if I get the count wrong, are those ones that I've been calling tentative. Those are the ones where if you wanted to edit, remove, add, you're able to do that this evening. But as Mr. Combs was just saying, this, if it goes forward as is, this is all again to set the docket. The decision is not to approve or deny any of them substantively tonight.
Commissioners, which of the 11 would you like to discuss or have any questions on? Sure.
I have one question regarding the LRI request.
Sure.
And that would just simply to understand how the decision was made in the first place to move from the split zone to a singular zone that included the air corridor.
Sure. So this is the first map here in the middle of this page, shows you the full air accident potential zone, 1 and 2. And not to confuse the situation, but it's called different from the land use zone. So under the guidance for the base, for the airfield, you have the clear zone, the accident potential zone 1, and accident potential zone 2. And those are simply 1 mile, 3,000 by 3,000 period, size and shape. What you have immediately next to that is the actual zoning within the city of Lakewood. And you see the clear zone in gray. The gold is called Air Corridor 1. It's very close to the dimensions of Accident Potential Zone 1, but as you see, it's a little bit different on the edges. And then same thing for Accident Potential Zone 2 or Air Corridor 2, as it's called in Lakewood. What you see though on both sides of both zones is that they aren't that exact rectangle to recognize parcel boundaries. So if we go to the exact one we're talking about for LRI, that's this parcel here, and you'll see it's this odd shape, and rather than having a nice even ending point vertically anywhere here, it's kind of got this jog off to the east. So what the city did in 2019 was take a look at what the accident potential zone boundary was, that straight line, and there were a number of parcels. It wasn't just this one that were split, and it's just a general policy of the city to say, we don't want to have a single parcel zoned multiple things. So one part of the parcel you can do X, a different part of the parcels you can do Y. It's confusing for the most part, and most property owners don't necessarily like it either. So the city went ahead and rezoned, and for this, because of the amount of the parcel that was inside Air Corridor, the decision was made to keep it all Air Corridor and take away the industrial zone portion of the zoning. So what you now have heard from the parcel owner is that they would like to go back to the split zoning, is what they said tonight, where they're not asking to change any of the allowed uses or the zoning for the part that's actually lying within the accident potential zone. But they do want to move this part of the parcel that was outside of that geographic area back to an I1 or industrial 1 zoning. And again, this is really just if you want to get policy wonky, but it's also for reality. If someone owns a parcel, would you want to have it as more than one zone on the same parcel or not? So the policy decision was made a few years ago to do this.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Since the real reason for the non-split zone decision to keep them everything in a parcel number that's already designated, it's bureaucratic. It's not functional on the ground. And businesses deserve to be able to operate in what is the true function of their properties. If that means splitting a tax parcel on a use boundary, let it be, it would be my view, because it's the use that really should prevail and not the bureaucratic ease of keeping it in a tax parcel. You know, and the tax parcel can be further defined by the Pierce County tax assessor even, or we could ask the tax assessor to create a parcelization that provides for the air corridor. If the staff insists on the bureaucratic necessity of the parcel number. But we really should keep in mind the use and the function on the ground for the businesses that pay taxes and employ people in the city of Lakewood.
Interesting to note that these that parcel and the adjacent parcel, just completely different use.
Yeah.
One's an apartment complex, and the one in question here is just vacant land, basically. But again, as indicated,
And it's also, again, the city is young. The air corridor or actual potential zones obviously predate incorporation. And so you have those residential uses. You mentioned an apartment building. I already talked about the manufactured home parks that are also located within air corridor 1 and 2. That's all non-conforming, but it's there. Eventually it will go away. It's not going to be rebuilt under non-conforming use rules. However, this was a situation where a zoning decision was made and now you have the property owner coming back to you and asking it be reconsidered.
any other?
If that's the
That's
case,
it?
Chair, I would move that we take the resolution 2024-04-007, move it forward for city council review.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Combs, second by Mr. Larson, that we approve resolution 2024-07. Commissioners, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done. Okay. Ms. Spear, next steps, please.
Next steps, first of all, you do not have a meeting in 2 weeks. You are excused for the rest of the month. The city council has a special budget hearing 2 weeks from tonight, so you do not have a meeting that evening. So the next time we'll see you is in early November. And at that point, we'll be talking about a number of other issues. If I'm remembering right, we're talking climate change, we're talking maybe urban forestry. And then it'll be 2 meetings in November, 1 meeting in December, and then you'll be done for the year. I would just suggest, as you are thinking about it in your own mind, don't do it as a meeting out of an official meeting, please. But the decision is made annually regarding who's chair and vice chair. So if there's any desire for any change there, kind of think about that, and that'll come up probably second meeting in November.
Okay. Any other comments for the good of the order? Aye, commissioners. No?